Okay. Well, hello everyone. My name is Andrea, and I'm going to be presenting Firebase to you today. Let me share my screen. Okay. This is going to be like a bit of an all over the place because we'll be just trying things out, and I'll show you how what Firebase is, why you should even care about Firebase, and how to integrate it into your app. So yeah, my name is Andrea. I'm the vice lead of the GDSC pub. Been running this for over a year now, and yeah, I'm really into Flutter and Firebase, and hope you'll be as well. So the agenda for today is, intros, and then we'll dive into why you should even care about Firebase, like what is so special about it. If you're hearing about it the first time, then I don't know what's it all about. We'll talk about some Firebase components, because Firebase is a generic term that actually has a lot of like subsections to it. And there are a lot of moving pieces there we need to discuss. And we'll go into the demo. You can see that I naively put ASP.NET and Flutter here. I actually have only Flutter prepared for today. So for the ASP.NET, I'll show some codes probably, but I won't be able to actually like demo anything. Although I did build an Xamarin app that uses authentication, but we'll see how time-wise it's going to go, and kind of go from there. Maybe we'll have some discussion around the C# and the .NET library later on. And yeah, feel free to ask any questions as I go as well. Also, because this is going to be less of structured session. I'm hoping to like, if you want me to try something, if you want me to integrate something and like try stuff together, maybe you were stuck in a personal project and you want me to try things, I'm completely open to that, and we can figure stuff out together. So yeah, but yeah, there's going to be some time at the end for questions as well. All right, so before I kind of show what Firebase consists of, I want to talk about what Firebase is, and like in a nutshell, why do you need it? So, let's say you built your like a to-do app or a messaging app or whatever. You for sure need a backend for it. So you need an authentication system. You need to handle users. You want different users on different devices, or even on different platforms, to share the same information. So let's say if you're building a chat app, you want all the users in the groups, whether they are accessing your app through the web, through their Android device, iOS device, should be able to view all the messages in the group instantly from one source of truth, so to say. Those are like the two main ones that I can think of. Another third very vital component is that, okay, you build something, build a chat app or you build a to-do app, you want to distribute it. You want for everybody to be able to access it. So Firebase allows you not only to store the data, provide authentication for your app, but also host your web app or distribute your Android, iOS application through its services. And actually there is like a bunch more, which we'll see all the components here. So Firebase helps you build better apps. You can see some components that I've already mentioned. So Auth helps you build authentication systems, and you can build Auth systems integrating with like GitHub and Facebook, Twitter, Google, obviously, or just a plain email passwords authentication is also possible. So you have tons of options there. Hosting, if you have a website you want to host, that's like literally a one command host thing. It's like the easiest hosting service I've ever seen. And I'll hope I'm gonna demo this and it won't struggle. Cloud Functions is an interesting one. It's kind of a piece of code that's running in the cloud that's independent of your application, and it can be triggered by different things that happen to your database or happen to your users. I don't know, let's say you want to clean up your database when the user is deleted. That's where you build the Cloud Functions that runs there. MLKit is amazing. There is a bunch of machine learning models that come built in with Firebase. And yeah, all of these things, I'm probably not going to go through each one of them, but the main ones, I'm going to talk about the main ones that we're going to cover in the next slide. But yeah, you can see that there are a lot of different moving pieces to building an application. And what Firebase is if you would just define it as a backend as a service, you create your project, and here you go. You can use all of these things. You just need to enable the SDKs, use the SDKs in your app, and you're good to go. When you launched your app, it also helps you to improve your app quality. So let's say you want to see status reports of your app's users. And this is kind of like, we're not going to cover this today, definitely, but just so you know what's available. You can have performance monitoring on your app, seeing which pages on your website load faster or slower. You can enable Crashlytics, and that will give you a log of where did your users kind of struggle and where did they have errors and so on. App distribution is what I talked about. It's Android and iOS. If you want to distribute your app, that's similar to like App Store and Google Play. And you can grow your user base with a lot of different things. You can do A/B testing. If you never heard about it, it's basically a way of deciding which interface works or which user flow works better for your app. Implementing cloud messaging, in-app messaging, that's what you do for notifications. Dynamic links, analytics, there's tons of stuff. I'm not going to go too deep into that. Out of all of this, wow, this loaded less epic than I expected, but out of all of this, what you'll need is essentially these four services that you're going to use the most: auth, hosting, functions, and Firestore. So I'm just going to cover those in more detail. Actually, this selection is not very true. It really depends on your use case. For example, if you're building like an image picker or some sort of like a storage app, you would definitely use cloud storage. But putting that aside, these the ones in these columns actually like the main services that Firebase provides. So let's talk about each of them in more detail. So what is Firebase Auth? Firebase Auth is, as I already said, an authentication system that supports both like email passwords authentication, where you can log in and track your users, as well as phone number authentication or custom authentication with your Gmail account, with your Facebook, and so on. Interesting thing, it also supports anonymous authentication. So you don't even, there is an option not to have an account and also support those users. What is Cloud Firestore? So Cloud Firestore is like your SQL database that you all are pretty familiar with, I hope, but it's no SQL. And what does that mean? That means that you don't have your tables and columns and rows, and they don't have many-to-many relationships and so on. That's all like thrown out. Forget that. NoSQL operates on documents and collections, and there are collections of documents, and documents can have sub-collections. I'm going to explain the structure a bit more going forward. But yeah, essentially it's your data store where you store information about your app in a particular way. If you're coming from the SQL world, this is going to be very weird to you. NoSQL databases usually have repetitive data. You'll find same pieces of information in multiple collections, which will need to be synced, and that's going to be very weird. But NoSQL is much simpler and it's much faster. So that's why this is used, Cloud Firestore is used. I need to mention that Firebase is also, originally it was built for mobile devices and for mobile applications. If you're building like your Android or iOS app, that's probably going to have most support from Firebase because that's what its target is. The official targets or the official like goal of Firebase was to support those mobile developers and providing them a very easy to plug backend for them to not to waste time on this. And yeah, what is very cool is that Cloud Firestore comes with offline handling and auto scaling out of the box. You don't need to handle any of this. This is basically like you need to add one line of code and you have offline support out of good to go, right? So let's say you in an elevator or you're in a tunnel or in a plane, you still want to access your app, right? And operate in the app. Nobody's gonna like restrict you from writing documents. What Firestore will do, it's going to cache whatever you've written or read through your offline limits, and then it's going to try to batch and write and sync that after you come back online, which is very cool, and you don't need to implement any of that functionality. Cloud functions are, yeah, so as I mentioned, these are interesting things. Like these are basically your functions as you would think of them in codes. Can be written in multiple different languages, Python, JavaScript, C#, you choose. And these run independently of your app. So what Firebase will do is it's going to basically spin up a new container, a new computer instance that's going to run your function independently of where your app is running. And what are these guys useful for? Well, let's say you're building, let's say you're building like a Discord application, a Discord bot, and you want to send a message to your users through your application whenever something happens in Discord. Maybe there is a server you're connected to or whatever. You can define an event in Firebase in Google Clouds to trigger a function that's going to run whenever something happens in Discord. You don't need to install any SDKs on your main application because your main application doesn't even care about Discord. You're basically separating Discord integration into this cloud function that runs completely separately. Then you can, let's say, write something to the database or modify a user. Let's say somebody wants to register to your app through Discord. You can write a function to do that, right? You can fire off a function that registers your user, and your main app doesn't even know about this happening. And I'm talking about Discord, but you can think of any other app like Slack or whatever. So these are pretty cool things. And aside from that, a very nice use case for Cloud Functions is actually modifying your database. Let's say, as I already mentioned, let's say when you delete a document, delete an account, you want to also clean up your database in other places. You don't need to write any code on your app side. You can have a Cloud Functions that cleans that up. So yeah, pretty cool bits here. Let's see. Okay, and the last one I think I have is Firebase Hosting. Pretty straightforward. Just you have a website, you can put it up on a CDN, accessible for anybody around the world. You can specify a custom domain, of course. if you have one. And it's completely free, by the way. I'm gonna actually, after this, I'm gonna talk about costs and how all that plays out. But yeah, so hosting is amazing because it's very simple to integrate if you're using Firebase. It's basically one command deploy, and you can spin up servers all around the world and support users all around the world. It's pretty flexible. All right, I'm gonna exit my beautiful presentation and I'm gonna show stuff. So first of all, that came to my mind was, you're probably wondering how much all of this costs and like, is there a free tier you can use? And absolutely there is. So I'm gonna actually check Firebase billing. Pricing, let's see. So you can see they have like this page where they describe each product and what do you need to pay for it. So there are two plans to Firebase. Spark plan, which is completely free. You didn't need to even specify any like credit card information at all. And there's Blaze plan that you will need to tie into your like billing account that you set up with Google Cloud. A lot of different things, and let's look at like Cloud Firestore, for example. You can store up to 1 gigabyte of all data. You can have a generous amounts of writes, reads, and deletes. This is how they measure how you're using your database, by the way. Either you write new data, or read existing data, or delete data in the system. I think 20K writes per day is enough for any proof of concept you're ever going to build, or 50K reads for that matter. And if you want to go and scale, you can always switch to the Blaze plan and go further, right? So it actually forwards you to Google Cloud pricing. I need to mention that whenever you create a Firebase project, you're also creating a Google Cloud project. So Firebase is a nice wrapper around Google Cloud, where it's kind of like, it's providing its APIs to access Google Cloud resources in a nicer way than Google Cloud itself, in my opinion, at least. But essentially it's the same thing. If you're creating a Firebase application, you're creating a Google Cloud application. All right, so Cloud Functions. For Cloud Functions, you will need to switch to the Blaze plan. That's mandatory, but it's free up to 2 million invocations, which is very generous. Hosting is, once again, like data transfer, 360 megabytes, 10 gigabytes. This is like, I don't know, I've rarely hit any limits with Firebase at all. And yeah, you can explore this at your time. It's Firebase Google.com pricing if you want to learn more. But yeah, let's see how this looks in like in action. I have a project here that I created with Firebase. Actually, I'm going to start further out for people that are curious. So if we go to like the Firebase official page and you hit get started, straight up you can create a new project, or you can pick an existing one. I'm not going to go through creating a new project, although this is pretty simple. It's going to prompt you, like ask you a bunch of questions about like, what is your name and what is your target audience area where you want to target your application. But at the end, you get something like this, where you have a lot of tabs on the left. These are all the services that I mentioned on my slides. And actually more than this, much more than this. And yeah, so this is actually a project I'm using for my Android class in school. I hope we're not going to mess anything up because I haven't received any mark for that yet. But yeah, we'll see. So the goal for today is going to be to build like a very simple messaging application where anybody can access the application, post a message, and they only can post a message if they are authenticated into the system. And I'm going to be using Flutter to develop this and integrate Firebase, and hopefully it's going to be clear. But we'll see how it goes. So I have already a prototype built here, which doesn't use Firebase at all. I'm actually going to run it and show you. So let's switch to Chrome because that runs faster. Let's give this a few seconds. While this is running, any questions so far? Any feedback? Anything at all?
So far, so good.
Great, awesome. Yeah, feel free to ask anything. All right. So yeah, what I have here is the small authentication screen. So you land on sign in to start with. You can enter your email or your password. When you sign in, it's going to forward you to your Cool Messages app, and you can enter a message, and it's going to be posted here. And you can also enter some other messages, post them. So obviously, if I restart this app, all of the messages is going to be cleared because this is only using like in-memory storage. And yeah, our goal is, so first goal is to implement the sign-in functionality where we want to authenticate a person with email and password. We just don't want them to be let in with anything. Second goal is to persist this to show the messages no matter where you access them from and when you access them. So I'm going to go through the structure of the app real quick and how it works so far. But it is pretty straightforward. And even if you haven't seen Flutter at all, which I highly recommend you watch some of the tutorials I've created. But yeah, it should be fine to understand even if you haven't seen Flutter before. So all of the files in here that you see in the root of the project, at least, are different screens that we see. So the main.dart is the starting point of our app. It's going to launch our application, which is just going to render the sign-in page no matter what. The sign-in screen has two text fields and an elevated button, so pretty straightforward as well. And the only thing you need to really know about this is that when you press the button, sign-in happens. Here's the sign-in method. Make this a bit bigger, which will just navigate to the home page. So our to-do here is to actually sign in the user and not let them in unless they are signed in. So the home page is another widget, which is a builder. So a list view builder that's going to build a list tile with each item as a title and subtitle. These are the elements that you see on the screen on the right. And it also has a text field and an elevated button. So whenever you post a message, we're going to do something with the message service, which is a class that I created. It's a very simple one. I'm going to show it in a second. But on a high level, we're creating a message with an author of anonymous and the text that we get from the field. We're adding this message to the message service, and we're updating all the messages that are shown here. Pretty straightforward. Let's have a quick look at message service, and then I'm going to start integrating Firebase into this. So message service is very simple. It just has a list of messages that it stores in memory. When you want to get messages, it's going to return this list. If it's adding a message, it's adding this message here. Why did I put this in a separate class? Well, we're going to use Firestore in here. It's not going to store this in memory anymore. And you want to have this separated from your presentation layer, not to have just for separation of concerns. You want to have your database access separately from your UI. All right, let's dive into this. So first of all, what I need to do is let's check out the docs for our Flutter Firebase. So if I just Google like Flutter Firebase, the first link that I get is Flutter Fire, which is a very cool resource if you want to integrate Firebase into your Flutter app. Yes, this is specific to Flutter, but there is a pretty good documentation for integrating and using the SDKs in Firebase itself. Let's say you're building like a Python app. I can go to Firebase Firestore. Yeah, basically I want to show off how docs look, and that they're pretty good and extensive, unlike other technologies. So let's say you want to read some data. They have a lot of different options that you can choose from. You want Java, here's your Java codes. You have Python, here's your Python codes that you can use, right? So they support a lot of different languages, one of which is C#. So I have no excuse of not showing you the C# demo, but yeah, it was, for some reason, it was just more pain for me to figure this out. But yeah, notice that they don't have Dart or Flutter in here. This is a bit sad for me, but they have a separate page that basically covers everything you need to know. And yeah, what we want to do is just implement authentication. So for the usage, we'll need to install our Firebase into Flutter. And yeah, so we are going to be focusing on web and Android for this use case. So there is some platform-specific installation that you need to do. But on the high level, you just need to install Firebase core, and that's pretty much it. So that's what I'm going to do. Switching back to our Flutter app, I'll go to the terminal, and I'm going to run Flutter get add, sorry, Firebase core. All right, if I check my pub spec right now, I should have Firebase core in here. This is good. And let's complete some platform-specific installation as well. So for Android, for example, we will need to install a specific file that contains all API keys and all like database references that we need to communicate with Firebase, which is Google Services JSON. So I'm going to go through this real quick, and we'll need to do on the Firebase side. I'm actually thinking maybe we do web first, because that's going to be easier. Let's maybe go through the web installation. So On the website, we'll need to add a script to our index.js in Flutter. So as some of you might know, Flutter builds into multiple different platforms, one of which is web, in fact. And we have an index.html in here, which we can modify. I'm just going to dump this somewhere in the head, so it has reference to Firebase now. Cool. And yeah, we'll need to initialize Firebase in here as well. So I'm going to copy this code, place it somewhere in the body. Oh, interesting. They're actually placing this in the body of the app, but yeah, I'm curious if that makes a difference. Okay. So where does this come from? This comes from where we need to connect the app to Firebase. And if I go back to my project and go to project overview, you see that I already have some apps here. This is actually my assignment that I connected here, my attempts to create Xamarin app. So I'm going to add another app, which is going to be a web app. And I'm going to say it's Flutter web app. Let's actually check this and see how easy it's going to be. So it's already prompting us to set up Firebase hosting for this app, which means that it's going to be automatically hosted on the web. I'll register this. Give it a few seconds. Okay, it's prompting us to do stuff with NPM. We're using Flutter, so we don't really need to do that. In fact, there is a script tag option. And this is exactly the code that I was seeing in the web installation guide. So I'm just going to steal this. And we'll see how this goes. So we're importing initialize app from one of the CDNs. We're specifying all Firebase config. I'm actually not afraid of showing you this. Well, for one, because I trust you, but for another reason is that this configuration is safe to actually include in your source control, because although people that will have this information will be able to access your database and will be able to access your resources, you should protect them through other ways, for example, like Firebase, Firestore rules, and there are other protective paths that you need to take instead of hiding this config. And it's actually common to share this config if you're working in a team that needs to share a Firebase project. All right, I think this is enough for our web setup, I hope. And yeah, the only thing that worries me here is that Flutter Firebase is prompting us to use the 8 version of the Firebase SDK, and this is the 9 version, which they just recently released. So we'll have some errors. I'll get back to this, and we might need to do some more figuring out here. Okay, so we got Firebase core, we have everything set up, good to go. Now we need to actually implement authentication. So let's go back to our guide in here and go to the authentication piece. And what we'll need to do is to install the Firebase auth package in here. I actually wonder if I can find, I was hoping I could find a list of all packages and their names they have here. I'm not sure if I remember this correctly. Oh yeah, something like this, yeah. So this is the plugin name that we need to install, and this is the package that it correlates to. So we'll need authentication. And actually, I'm going to install Cloud Firestore as well. So let's actually stop this. I'm going to do a bunch of setup before we even run anything. So I'm going to run Flutter pub ads. I'm doing Flutter pub ads. If you're developing a C# application, these are just going to be your NuGet packages. If it's a web application, these are just npm installs. So kind of in your head, map this to whatever your use case is. We need Firebase auth. And I'm also going to need Cloud Firestore. Cool. All right. So I think we're good to start developing our sign-in page. And one thing we'll need to do, though, is to initialize our application once more in the main, where we actually start our app. And you need to determine where your starting point of the app is and kind of initialize your app at that point. So let's see. I'm actually going to check out how they advise we follow this. Let's see, initializing Flutterfire. So yeah, to initialize Flutterfire, you can initialize app method in Firebase class. What they want you to do is actually to use Future Builder, but I don't think that's necessary, to be honest. So we'll need to use this ensure initialized. This is a Flutter specific thing, by the way. And then we'll just need, I hope this can be async. Firebase. Initialize up. And we just need to await this. Cool. All right. Now if I go to my sign-in page, I should be able to access some methods in here. So let's see, Firebase auth instance, and there's a bunch of things we can actually check out here. So you see there is sign in with pop-up, sign in with email and password, which we're going to be using, but there's a lot of different ways you can interact with the Firebase auth instance. You can sign out, set persistence, how long your user is going to be stored in the session. A lot of different things. Set password reset email, very useful if you, they support emailing out of the box, which is very, very cool. But yeah, we're going to use, actually I have a sign-in screen, which I didn't think of, by the way. We should probably, this is going to be weird, but this is going to act as a register screen as well. I'm going to add another button for register. Just for the time's sake, I don't want to develop another page, and then this is going to be a register method. Now we're going to do create user with email and password. Our email is going to be email controller text. Our password is going to be password controller text. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to create a user. And if we succeed, we're going to just, actually going to do nothing because we still need to sign in, right? So no navigator push in this case. But we need to catch an error. And for now, I'm just going to print it out here. And for the sign-in case, I'm going to use very similar methods, which is sign in with email and passwords, same deal. Email controller text, password controller text. Cool. And for this one, I'm actually gonna navigate if we succeed. So I'm gonna try doing this. Oops. And we're gonna print what our error is. All right, let's see what happens. I actually have no idea what's gonna happen. Let's run our web client. I just hope this is not gonna crash horribly, which it might. I think this is pretty cool. Like, if you were to do this on your own, you would need to implement a lot of things. And what Firebase allows you to do is to use one method and you have your register thing. Use one method on the Firebase auth instance and you can sign in a user. I think this is amazing. All right, we did get an exception. Let's see what it's saying, or if it's saying anything. So Flutter web explicitly tested against 8.10, but you're currently specifying 8.6. Should be fine. Okay, it is something wrong with how I specified it in the index.js. So let's get back to that. Check it out. So we go to our index.html. So it was prompting us for 8.10, which I can just change it here. For now, I'm just going to comment out until we get the error that tells us to. I'm going to comment out this setup at all. Let's run this again and see what it says. All right. Just checking what I'm using on my other project meanwhile, and it seems like I'm using 6.1, which shouldn't be an issue. So you get the same issue. Okay. I see. Firebase options cannot be null when creating the default app. And this is probably when we were calling initialize app in our main method, I think. Just a few seconds here. I want to double check something so we don't spend too much time on this. Okay. So I think we have passed the error with the config for web, but I just need to specify the configuration options in here. So what I'm going to do is provide some Firebase options here. And you can see that it already formatted this for me. And I'm going to copy this from our config that we pasted in the index.html. So in fact, let me split this. App ID is going to be this. Message sender ID. I'm pretty sure we don't need all of these, but just in case. And project ID is this guy. So this is important to get this right because this is what Firebase is going to use to connect to your app. So let's start this again and see if this works. That's what happens when I don't prepare my workshops. All right. No errors. Cool. Okay, I think we're in business. So, I mean, the UI looks great. I hope I can fix this on the fly. Give it some spacing in here. Oh, this is going to be. Sometimes my setup with VS Code is lagging and it's just holding in the hot restarts window, but okay, it was taking a long time. Anyway, let's try to register a user. Let's test the good parts. So I'm just gonna, actually don't need to specify my email. I can register anybody. And I'm just gonna do some password here. All right, we did get an exception. Let's see what this says. So Firebase auth is not a function, get auth instance. Interesting, something is wrong when we were accessing the sign-in page. Let's see what this is. Firebase auth is not a function. Just gonna double check with the docs. I'm a bit confused with what the error is. So they display how to listen for user changes. But yeah, they're accessing Firebase auth instance, which I'm pretty sure this should work. Let's see, mail passwords. Yeah, they're using exactly the same API. I mean, one thing is that I'm not awaiting these calls, which is probably bad, but unrelated, because this is async functionality. I'm actually curious what's going on here. I'm doing a poor job of explaining how easy this is really. But it is when you know what you're doing. Okay, right now we're getting exceptions if we're trying to do anything, basically. Actually, I'm going to restart my application and see if that fixes it. So yeah, the initialization part should be fine. Then it is really simple, right? Like the code's given that I'm doing everything right, which I'm clearly not, but the code should work with just these methods provided. Let's see. All right. At least it's not throwing it. I mean, it is printing the error, which is fine. Dart global Firebase auth. This is so weird. All right, so I'm gonna actually get back to this. Let's see if Firestore works. Never run into this. This is good that I'm demoing kind of hot from the oven. Let's go to the home page and let's try to implement Firestore. I'm gonna just show you how that's done. And let's hope at least something works. And then we get back to the authentication later. So for now, I'm just gonna comment out the sign-in parts and just allow us to go to the home page. So we're here and let's go to our message service. I'll make this full screen for now. So, okay, we have get messages, we have add message. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create the Firebase, I'm gonna create the database first to show you how the database is gonna be structured. So I'm gonna exit this window. I wonder if that's because I didn't add the app. I think I didn't finish. I'm gonna go through this again, actually. So this is our Flutter web app with Firebase Hosting. Okay, this is off. Oh, interesting. It did add the web app, which is fine. Okay, I guess that's fine. I'm getting sidetracked. So we have our Firestore database in here. And actually you have two options. You have a real-time database and you have a Firestore database. So what real-time database is just essentially a JSON. It's a very simple database. It has a very limited support. That's why I'm kind of advocating towards Firestore. But it is a very good use case if you're building something very, very simple, like a messaging app. For our use case, this would work perfectly. But I just want to show off how to connect Firestore, because if you're creating something more complicated, is what you're going to be using most of the time. So I'm just going to start a collection, which are going to be our messages. And I'm going to create a sample document in here, which is going to be one of the messages in the collection. So you can create a custom ID, and the field is going to be title. I'm going to say hello world. And the other field is going to be author who sent the message. I'm just going to put me as the author. Cool. And here's our database in action. We already have a collection and a document. It is pretty logical. Like if you're doing, if you're developing something, you will have collections of things and you'll have the actual things that are stored in those collections. It's kind of like a one-to-many relationships between your table and your other table that stores everything. It's just a different structure. I could start another collection here and chain documents and collections as much as possible. But yeah, there's a better explanation, and if you want to understand how the data is actually stored and how to operate on it, probably better to refer to the official documentation for this. But for our purposes, we're only going to have one collection that stores a lot of messages in here. So let's see and try to display this on our Flutter end. So to get all the messages, I'm going to need to get my Firebase Firestore instance. So I'm gonna get the instance, and you already have a lot of methods you can use here. One that I'm going to use is going to be the collection, because I want to specify that I want to look into the messages collection. And in fact, I'm going to get everything from here. So our get message is now going to be async because it's doing a network call to our database. And if you can see here, what this is going to return is going to be a future of some query snapshots of like a crazy thing. Well, first of all, we need to await this. So I'm going to call this snapshots and await on the result. And what snapshots is going to be is just a query snapshot of each document. It's telling you that it's a map string dynamic. Map string dynamic is a very generic way for Flutter telling you you're working with an object, and this could be anything in here, right? Like the key is a string, and the value could be a number, could be a timestamp, could be a string, it could be anything. So it tells you it's dynamic. What we want to do is return a list of messages. So what I'm going to do is say snapshots. Docs is going to return me a list of query document snapshots. And I want to map them. So for each document in this doc collection, I want to return, in fact, a new message. I'm going to just chain to a list at the end because that's what we need to do. If I just do this, I mean, message probably doesn't have an empty constructor. Yeah. What message is just a title and an author, and it has a constructor for it. So I'm just going to, you probably want to have a helper method that converts your Firestore documents to your model in your code. But I'm just going to go do this in line. Or let's actually do this the proper way. So if I pass a document in here, and document is our query document snapshots, I can have another constructor that accepts a document snapshot. And I'm going to say that this author is, oops. The author is going to be the document data. And data returns a map of string dynamic. Actually, it returns an object. So I'll say that it's, in fact, I think I might be able to chain it off of the document itself. yeah, I think this is valid. It allows you to do indexing in the Dart SDK. And the same with the title. In fact, I don't even need this though. And yeah, this is pretty much it. Let's see what it's complaining about. Right. Okay, I'm going to create a static method that's just defining this. So let's have a message, static message from document snapshot. And I'm going to return a message from here. Author is going to be our doc author. The title is going to be doc title. I'm basically mapping the database instance to our class. Now what I can do here is say message from document snapshot doc, and this returns me a message, and then we get a list of messages at the end. So we just need to return this. Yeah, what is this complaining about? Right, so because we're using async, this is going to return a future of lists of messages. And this is how you get a collection from Firestore. Now, before I implement add message, let's actually see if this works. So I'm going to stop this, rerun this. Ooh, we have errors. Let's see. Right, because the usage is going to be different, right? We're using get messages in 2 places. And in fact, let's see how I'm going to do this. I'm going to chain a then and just set the items in here. And items is going to be value. And in this case, post message is going to be async. And we'll just need to await on get messages. Let's fetch this outside of set state. Cool. Let's see if this works. While this is running, I'm going to implement add message. So we save time. So right now it's just adding it to the in-memory list, which I'm going to get rid of. Our database is over storage now. All I need to do is say collection. And then add. And this is expecting a map of string dynamic. And I can convert my message to this. So I can say message, and I'm going to develop some method that says to map. So in the message class, let's create a method. It's going to return a map of string dynamic to map. And we're going to return an object with a title of title and an author of author. Cool. Okay. Of course, we get an error. I just can't try anything that works today. Let's see. Maybe this is related to, yeah, this is the same error as the authentication. I'm doing something terribly wrong. Dart global Firestore is not a function. I'm sorry, guys. Let's actually like look into this. I'm probably doing something very stupid. Oh, really? It is the 810 that I'm using. Oh, wow. Okay. So let's stop this. Let's not let my computer die. And if we go to index.html again, I'm using the 10, which was not wise of me. Switch it back to 861. So yeah, it's very important which thing you're using. Oh, and I forgot to include imports for platform-specific things that I'm using. Sorry, for like authentication and Firestore. So for every component in Firebase, you'll need to do these imports. The same way I installed packages to Dart, I also need to do, because Dart is like compiles into these platforms, I also need to configure them. So this needs to use Cloud Firestore. And this needs to use Firebase Auth. In fact, if I probably switch to the documentation for Flutter Fire, it's going to tell me. Let's see, web installation. Well, maybe not. But yeah, if you're adding even like the Firebase app imports, you also need to add imports for other components. Let's see, I hope this works. Let's run this again. Hopefully our auth is going to work. Let's hope for the best. So yeah, just to kind of go over this again, the only thing we needed to do is to reference a collection, get all of its elements, do some mapping, and then here, just add something to the collection. It's a very intuitive UI, especially with like NoSQL database. And I love it very, very much. Yeah, it is giving us the same warning, which I'm going to ignore this time. Let's see if authentication works. So if I try to log in or register, given sign-in provider is disabled for the Firebase project, enable it in Firebase console under sign-in method tab of the auth section. This is a very useful error, and in fact, one that I was expecting, because if you're doing authentication, there's a specific authentication tab, which can manage your users. And I purposefully disabled email and password. This was the error that I was expecting. For each sign-in method, you need to enable the provider that's providing this sign-in method. So I can enable this. Now let's try creating our user. Nothing happened, and that's actually good. I think if we go to back here and go to users, here's my new user. All right. This was a stupid error. I'm sorry, everybody. I forgot to include the web-specific CDNs, but yeah, you can see that it's listed in here. It has a UUID. It tells you which provider it's used. All right, let's sign in. I'm actually gonna comment this code. Okay, we got an exception. Let's see what it says. I wonder if it's because I didn't restart it. Oh, interesting. So it did sign in our user and it tried to go to the next page and it was giving us the same exception that the Firestore is not a function. I think that's what's happening. So let's just focus on the auth part right now. I'm gonna comment out the navigation piece. I'm gonna get some debugging so we actually know what's happening. So user signed in. And here I'm going to print user created. And let's restart this to be safe. The reason we are getting this issue is possibly because I messed up this import as well. Let's double check. All right, not this aggressive. Let's see what as CDM they're using. Oh, so it is Firebase Firestore, interesting. Although I was thinking it's Cloud Firestore because that's what Dart is using, but it is Firebase Firestore. So this should get our Firestore to work. In fact, I'm pretty confident it will, so I'm going to comment out this guy. And let's see what happened. While this is running, there are a lot of different tabs and things you can see about your database as well. You can see your usage patterns, for example. You can see how many reads and writes you get, which indexes are created. Rules is something I was talking about. Right now, I have a read-write policy of like anything. Like I can read until some certain time, but you would define some specific rules of who can read your database and who can write towards your database. Anyway, let's see what we got. So let's create another person, actually, another user. Give them the same passwords. So for register, we see user created. If I switch back here and go to authentication, I should see them. Yeah. And if I didn't clear the email and password. If I sign in, the user is signed in, and we are navigated to our page. The only problem that I see is that we don't see our hello world in here, which is the next step. But sign in worked fine. One thing before I move on to debugging Firestore is I want to show what errors could be thrown here. So let's go back. And for example, if you don't specify a valid email, try to register. It's going to throw a very nice exception saying the email address is badly formatted. If you're going to provide a very low strength password, given the email is fine, there is another error in here. So it already comes with stuff out of the box. If you want to develop really fast, give some good feedback to your user, like these messages I can just show to the user, right? I can do a try catch, store them in here, show them to the user. It's pretty nice. Same thing if I sign in with a different something bad, it's going to say that the user was not found. There is no user corresponding to this identifier. It's a very nice error system, I think, for authentication, which I just wanted to show. But yeah, anyway, let's try and figure out why our Firestore is a bit funky. All right. So we go to home, and what will happen is, oh, I think it's just the get messages that's not going to reset the states of our items. Let's try this. Let's wrap this in a set states call. I'm actually going to do this way. Set states, and then put this in here. Let's sign in again. Yay, we got our hello world, finally. So yeah, I was just missing a set state in here, so it needs to refresh the state of our application. Let's see if adding a message works. So let's type, ooh, hey, look at that, we got a message in here. If I go back to my database, Firestore database, we got another message in here, which has an author and a title. One interesting thing is that if I keep adding messages, you'll see that they're in some random order. We got lucky this time. Let's see. Yeah, so they're being added in like random order. This is because they are ordered by what ID they are given. So if you want to order them by timestamps, you will either need to store this as a separate field or fetch them from metadata about each document, but I'm not going to do that right now. One thing I want to do is to change the author from anonymous to whoever, to like the email of the user that's registered, that's signed in, to show you how that works. Probably the last thing I'm going to do, and then I'm going to open up for questions. And if you want to need to try and break this even further. So the home, where we create the message, I'm always posting an author of anonymous. What I can do is actually get the author that is signed in. So we can use the same Firebase auth instance. Firebase auth, and I'll need to import that. And there is a current user getter, which is optional. I mean, it could be null, right? Like you could not have the user. So I'm going to store this in a separate variable. If the user is null, I'm just going to return from here. And what I'm going to display is the user email. Which, right, it also could be null. In that case, I'm going to insert anonymous. All right, let's see how this goes. So I have two accounts. One like this, I think. Yeah, so Here's all our messages. And if we post a new one, here's our email. So pretty cool, just fetching the email of the current user. Now, if I go and sign in, I wonder if this is going to work because I'm not signing out actually. But if I change this to the other user and post a new message. Yeah, okay, this worked. So you see there is a different email. So yeah, this is kind of Firebase Firestore and Auth in a nutshell. Not very smooth, as you can see, because yeah, I'm kind of doing this offhand. But I mean, you've seen the process of debugging, which I think is helpful as well. Actually, one very last thing that I'm going to do is show hosting, and hopefully that's going to be pretty fast. So we can initialize our projects, which we haven't done before, because we need to have the CLI installed. But what I can do is go into here and say Firebase init. Declare this as a Firebase project and kind of see what services I want to use. For this, I just want to use hosting. Hopefully that's what I want. They are changing this pretty quickly. So I'm going to use an existing project and I'm going to use this one. So it's asking me what do I want to use as a public directory. That's actually very important. That's the directory it's going to use to publish. In fact, I want to use the build web, I think, for this. So build/web. No, that's fine. No. And yeah, I think we're good. So now we just need to build our application for web with Flutter build web. So hopefully this is going to compile it to build/web. Let's see. I think because we created the hosting, it already should be set up. Oh, actually not. This is interesting. Yeah, so it's Firebase login, Firebase init. That's what I've done. And then the only thing you need to do is Firebase deploy. We'll just wait for our tool to finish running there. So this is our application. If I go there right now, there's nothing here. So we finished building. You can see there is a whole lot of stuff built in here. Fingers crossed, let's see if this works. Firebase deploy. And if not, you can just trust me this will if you have the configuration right. So yeah. All right, this was pretty quick. Let's refresh our page and hey, look at that. I paste this in the chat if anybody wants to play around. Where's my Zoom? Can I access the chat at all? You can paste, you can post your messages now. We can have a unique messaging platform, if you will. I'm gonna take questions at this time. If anybody has any feedback or people wanna say anything. I'm sorry this was like a very rough session, but yeah, it is what it is. Just gonna finish off by logging in here. Yeah, it is pretty straightforward to implement. And yeah, like if we didn't have that hiccup with the web config, I think it would be just like, to recap, it would just be 2 methods in the sign-in page. Hey, like create a new user, sign in with an existing one, and then just this messaging service. Hey, get me all the messages, and also add a new message. That's it. You have authentication, you have your storage, and we have a website in no time, I think. I think this is pretty cool. Hey, look at this, Eric. Eric is our new user. Pretty nice. All right, guys, if nobody has any questions, I'm gonna wrap up here. Thanks for sticking around. I know this was a rough one, but I hope you learned something, and I hope you now understand what Firebase is about and how to connect your application to it. And if you want me to go deeper into any of these services, I can probably have a more fleshed out demo of this. And yeah, I mean, development is never smooth. So you'll need to be able to kind of navigate the documentation. I'm actually kind of glad that it turned out how it did today with all the config that I needed to do, because it kind of showed you what you will face when you're going to be developing, integrating Firebase into your application, what challenges you'll need to solve, and you need to understand what places you need to look. So yeah, once again, if you want to go anywhere from here, probably going to the official documentation, exploring what can be done in here is the best. Also, I'm going to be posting this. By the way, I'm going to be posting all of the code that I've written to the GitHub, so you can kind of look over it. If you don't know where the GitHub is, or don't know how to access the organization, shoot me a message on Discord. I'll probably even create another post for people who are interested. We have all our codes for all the workshops on the separate GDSC organization and GitHub. And yeah, hopefully you'll find it useful. All right. Have a wonderful evening, Friday evening. Thanks for spending this time with me. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. And yeah, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.